Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden, joined as always by Tori, McElhaney, and Terrin Waack. We are coming to you guys after a little bit of a hiatus. We were down in Miami covering joint practices, the first preseason game, all of that good stuff, ironing out some travel with the podcast. So we'll hopefully get everything buttoned up by the time the regular season rolls around. But we also felt like, given the injury news, it would make sense to kind of hold everything until we got a little bit more clarity on DeMarcco Hellams, Bralen Trice, how everything was going to shake out. We know stuff about Bralen Trice. We don't know anything about DeMarcco Hellams yet.
I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah, Raheem did give us a little bit of an update this morning. He did say that he was going to miss a significant amount of time.
Quote, unquote.
Yeah.
There you go.
Which I think that's telling because, and he said it was an ankle injury. He did confirm that.
Yes.
And I think that's telling the fact that, okay, here we sit at 12:35 on Monday, August 12th, and he hasn't been placed on IR. Mm-hmm. Even though Raheem Morris is saying, it's a significant period of time, and there are reports about the Falcons bringing in some safeties across the league to work out. There are reports out there. So I think that just goes to show that it's telling. It's not a, I feel like a Jeff Okudah situation from last year where we thought it was really, really bad, and then he only missed the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season and was able to come back.
You do or do not think it's going to be like that?
I don't. I think it may be a little bit more serious than that.
So do you think, on the spectrum of going on IR, done for the season, and Jeff Okudah,
somewhere in the middle?
It's okay. So we're looking, and this is all speculation, right?
Right.
But my mind then goes to week 8, 9, 10,
yeah,
somewhere around.
That's a long time though.
I don't, and that's,
I need a definition of significant in this regard.
Significant amount of time, quote Raheem Morris. Yeah. So who's to say? I don't know. All we know is that that Raheem Morris said it's a significant amount of time. It's an ankle injury, and the Falcons are reportedly working out a guy like Justin Simmons.
Yes.
According to Ian Rappaport.
Right. And I mean, that would make a lot of sense. You do still have Richie Grant and Jesse Bates here, and Richie Grant has been running with the ones, but losing DeMarcco for a significant amount of time is going to be costly. So that is where you look at bringing in potential help in whatever role you kind of envisioned for DeMarcco. But let's turn our attention to Bralen Trice. And Terrin, it sucks that Bralen is going to miss the year, because I think anybody who's listened to this podcast knows that we have been really excited and enjoying watching Bralen out there on the field. I mean, walk us through kind of what you think about that.
So this news came out, what day is today? Today's Monday. Yesterday, Sunday, that Bralen Trice is going to be put on the reserve/injured list along with the defensive back Harrison Hand. So those two are confirmed. Those we know for sure. It's not speculation.
Along with Rondell Moore, who we talked about last week.
Yeah. Different transaction, but yes. I'm taking them one bite at a time here, Tori.
Terren's like, I can only do one transaction.
I'm looking at my calendar. And my mental vision right now is the calendar.
So sorry. Go ahead.
That wasn't yesterday. I didn't write about that yesterday. But yes, that is a big bummer for Bralen. It was really early on in the game, too. I noticed when Harrison Hand left practice on Wednesday, because he didn't come out. He was able to get off the field on his own, but was noticeably limping and didn't come back. And so to see that later, I can't say I was surprised. Bralen wasn't necessarily surprised. I think it was more of a surprise that DeMarcco wasn't on that transaction.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, automatically today you can see they're already trying to figure out who's going to fill that role Bralen had. I don't know that anyone's going to get the immediate reps with the first team, but you do see that people are already stepping in with the second where he was. You had James Smith-Williams out there. You had D'Angelo Malone. It's like a rotation today of who's going to be that next man up. And Jerry Gray was saying the same thing when it came to safety. Next man up. We're excited to see who the next man up. Who's going to take this opportunity, grab it, and run with it.
Here's the thing about Bralen that I'm going to stick on for a minute is it's really unfortunate because you saw how quickly he was maturing, and there was a maturation process to him that I think starting from where we saw him the first day of camp to where he kind of ended up these last week or so of pads going on, he was really, I think, pushing for, I'm going to say it, starting reps.
Yeah.
This is someone who I would not have been surprised if Bralen Trice would have turned into a starter in week 4, 5, 6, if not before then.
Yeah.
He was going to play an incredibly heavy role, I think, in rotation.
I completely agree.
And I think that having that idea and that vision and feeling really, really good. I mean, I was talking to Jakeem Smith, who is the outside linebackers coach for the Falcons, about Bralen literally on Wednesday.
I know.
On Wednesday, we were having a conversation about how Coach Smith feels as though Bralen, from a rookie perspective, he doesn't feel like a rookie out there because of the instincts that we've talked about previously. And also, he said from a mental standpoint, he's light years ahead of where you would think a rookie pass rusher would be. That's really, really important when you're talking about someone who could come in and make an immediate impact, like I think the Falcons were hoping, even though this is a guy who wasn't a day one pick.
Yeah.
So for all of those reasons, it sucks. It just sucks that it was just this like step back and the knee gives, and there's just not there's nothing to say about it that's good. There's nothing good to say about it, and you just like hope that he goes through the process of surgery, rehab, all that kind of stuff, and gets back to where he was when he left off. But honestly, I really do think that based on the nature of what we've seen since pads have come on, I think it should add a specific heat to Arnold Ebiketie's fire because we have been talking, at least I know I have, and I think we have too, like from...
He should be that guy. We're waiting for him to turn that corner.
Right. The point is that like Arnold Ebiketie, like now is the time. If there's ever going to be a time, the time is now. The time is nigh. And I really do think that when it all boils down to it, Bralen Trice, I thought he was going to be the guy. I thought he was having a better camp.
Yeah.
I would say that to anybody. The problem is that you no longer have him. So what's Arnold Ebiketie going to do about it? I would love to see kind of him take this and be like, you know what? Yeah, this sucks. Bralen Trice was playing well, but I'm going to show you that I am going to be the guy.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at the current roster right now at outside linebacker, and it's Bradley and it's Lorenzo Carter, it's Arnold Ebiketie, and it's D'Angelo Malone.
Bradley and was out there today getting significant reps with the second team, but
but that's four guys.
That's
and so
not
then
many options.
You kind of
James Smith-Williams too, even though
he's like kind of a defensive end. Yeah, but he did have some of these reps where he's dropping back into cover, and you see it, but he's not your pure pass rusher in the way that Bralen Trice, I think. Not that he was going to be a pure pass rusher, but I just think that Trice gives you a little bit more juice off the edge. So my mind goes to, and it's what we've been talking a little bit about with this inside linebacker group and their versatility. Do you maybe find ways to put Caden Ellis in some of these pass rushing roles? Do you find some ways to put Troy Anderson in some of these pass rushing roles and move some of these guys around, especially because I kind of like the way J.D. Bertrand handled himself out there on Friday night. He played a ton. He was sometimes just the single guy back there behind the zero technique as the inside linebacker. If he maybe kind of gets up to speed a little bit quicker than they expect, maybe that also allows you to use some of the versatility inside linebacker because you feel like you've got another guy that can be depth at that spot.
Something else that they were doing today that I really liked watching was they had some DB blitzes. They had a safety blitz that worked with the first team defense versus the second team offense, and they had a nickel blitz that they did with D. Alford one time. So it just goes to show that like pass rush can come from anywhere.
And edge setting.
Yeah. And I think that to your point, like, okay, we're talking about, Caden getting back to kind of what his roots are as an outside linebacker, edge rusher almost, like what he did in college, what he did with the Saints, but also taking it a step farther back and seeing what the secondary can do to help provide some pressure as well.
Maybe this is how we see all three of them on the field at once.
I mean, it could be, right? Like, you want to get your best 11 out there on the field. And I think Bralen the reason we're so high is because he was working himself into that top 11 conversation, and almost in a way where you got the sense that like people didn't want to talk too much about it because it was almost like a secret we're keeping under wraps because he was looking that good. And a lot of times you get that with guys
here we are like Bralen.
Right, we're just blowing the lid off of it. But you get that with guys sometimes you are thinking about cutting because you want to bring them back and get them on your practice squad when they've really flashed in camp. And there was no way they were going to ever cut Bralen Trice. But I was getting like the same vibes where it was kind of like, hey, look, he could be a little bit of maybe a secret weapon for us in the first 4 weeks of the season. And now, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But there were some other moves in addition to the two guys going on IR. Terrin, walk us through those. The big one being Jakeem Grant.
Oh. See, here and I was going to jump straight to the 2022 Most Outstanding Canadian getting cut. Nathan Rourke was released.
We'll pour out some maple syrup.
That was the third, one-way transaction. The other three was, one of them was, as you said, Jakeem Grant, a wide receiver / special teams option, where you can just see him easily fill that void that the Falcons lost when Rondale Moore went down, because Jakeem has significant return experience, and they had Rondale out there in return sets and whatnot, out there taking those reps. So that's kind of like a tit for tat, I thought. Who were the other two?
Spencer Brown.
Spencer Brown.
And John Paddock.
A running back, and then John Paddock is back.
Yeah, but mostly it's the Jakeem Grant aspect, I guess, of it all, because so you look at combined kickoff and punt returns since he entered the league in 2016, he is tied with Jamal Agnew of the Jacksonville Jaguars for most in the league. This is ahead of Cordero Patterson. This is ahead of Andre Roberts.
You look at his Pro Football Reference, and there were so many stats that were bolded as a league leader when it came to return.
Yeah. And so,
want that.
Exactly. I think given what we saw from the return game on Friday, and it's early, and Raheem even said, there are some situations where he may let the ball bounce into the end zone, and they're asking them to take him out, but a couple of balls hit the ground. Yeah, it didn't look super inspiring. So, Tori, bringing in a returner with kind of this history, an injury history as well, so, there's some give and take here. But does it excite you that Jakeem Grant is now a Falcon?
Yeah, and this was the first opportunity that I had to see him in person, and I think there are certain times where
he's just shorter than I expected. He is. So when you said in person, that's what I thought of instantly.
He's a jitterbug.
He is, and he's short area quickness. He had this one moment in one-on-ones that it just made me laugh because the coaches were giving, I think, him and AJ Terrell a hard time, but He wasn't really super involved in practice today, as can be expected. And Raheem even said before practice, he was like, he'll be full go in indie stuff, but when it comes to team stuff, he's just going to be watching, evaluating, getting the playbook. Yeah.
Right.
So that we understood that. He got the very, very last rep in one-on-ones, and AJ Terrell came out there. He lines up, he takes off, and AJ, I think, was going to almost body check him a little bit and have that contact and be physical, because he's very small.
Yeah.
He's small.
It's enticing to want to get up there and be like, let me put my hands on you and we'll see what you can do.
I don't know, because I was on the other side of the field, but I don't think AJ touched him. He made this move where he cut back and just went right by AJ. And AJ just went, all right.
I love that.
And just ducks under him.
Yeah. And it was a touchdown. Well, in one-on-ones. So
I think that was always a Chad Johnson move where Chad Ocho's, I don't know what's up with his last name anymore and where we stand on that, but that was always kind of all right, let me fake step forward and then almost take a step back so that when the DB punches, you're kind of vanishing a little bit. I know I'm fading away from the microphone, and that's bad podcasting. Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. Let's transition from the injuries, and let's go ahead and touch on quickly our takeaways from the preseason game. And we're a couple of days removed, so we don't have to spend too long on it. But Tori, we'll start with you. Were there any big picture takeaways from this game that you wanted to really touch on?
Yes. Defensive line. I was very pleased with what I saw from Kentavious Street, Zach Harrison, Taquan Graham, those second grouping of defensive linemen. I thought that their penetration was there was one moment where it was Kentavious Street just blew up the play back-to-back plays. And it was him just kind of out physicaling his guy.
It was Grady Jarrett-esque almost, because he did the kind of club rip move underneath. Yeah.
It was really impressive. And then Zach Harrison, of course, created the penetration and the pressure that ultimately led to Kevin King's interception. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that play happens without Zach Harrison just monster in his face.
He looks like, Terrin, and this is up your alley, Cam Jordan. I'm not saying he is playing like him, but body type wise, that big dude kind of off of the edge who's quicker than you think. Like I think of Cam Jordan.
Yeah. I was really pleased with what I saw from this defensive line early. I think that those guys are guys who are going to be rotational pieces, important pieces in depth. I think, too, even what I saw with this defensive line during joint practices, and I know I talked a lot about it on our last podcast about that red zone period where you saw Grady Jarrett, David Onyemata, Lorenzo Carter getting in the backfield, making things very difficult for Tua. I really liked what I saw, and I think it even carried over into today. There were a few moments today in practice where I felt like this defensive line, that the energy and the play-making ability of this defense starts with them, and they kind of set the tone. And so I really, really, really enjoyed what I saw from them, but I know that's not what everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear about Michael Penix Jr. So, Terrin, I'm sure you're going to talk about him, right?
Now I will.
Okay.
Well, what I liked most about like Michael Penix Jr. was his connection with Casey Washington so much. You just saw he was his most targeted receiver, and just seeing that connection between them build and grow will be really interesting, especially given the fact that now that Rondell Moore is out, if Casey Washington does capitalize on this opportunity and maybe gets reps with the first team and slides in that way, I don't know that will be the case, considering today, like, it was just Ray McLeod with Darnell Mooney and Drake London. So who knows how that'll play out.
Kadero Hodge got in there a couple times.
Did he?
Yep.
Okay. But seeing those two operate together is just kind of like seeing the future in a sense. So that was fun. But I also, Will and I were looking at film before 8 a.m. this morning. I hadn't even finished my coffee. He's like, look at this. And I was like,
here's the
we're
the
trying
thing.
to get better, Terrin.
Pushes my
It's Monday
coffee
morning.
out of the
Let's
way.
go.
And I was like,
Here's the thing. There was a beat of silence where Will and I were like, yeah, film.
I came in, I was like a kid on
dude,
Christmas.
It wasn't a little bit like, you gotta
We
wait
have
for the
film.
coffee to hit. The coffee's got to hit.
It was so
all
funny.
22.
Terrin
Hasn't
was just
learned
like,
that I'm-
Will does not have a case of the Mondays. And I was like, Terrin, we have new game tape
Will
to
hasn't
watch.
realized I am
all
not a
22.
morning person.
Oh, we're going to break that out of you, Terrin. Oh,
He
my
was like,
gosh.
there's a smile on his face before 10 a.m. My own mother knows not to like show me any love
You know
before
how
10
much like
a.m.
Rams tape from like week 3 of the 2023 season? I am so excited to be able to watch like Milo Eifler out there making plays.
You showed me great plays. Like, I'm not mad. I just wasn't awake. I was not awake. But just seeing, there were rookie mistakes as to be expected.
Yeah.
First NFL game, he's a rookie. I don't know what else I was going to say with the first. Yeah.
Right.
But you could also see some of that natural talent as to why he's here. There's so much zing on that ball. And we've talked about it before, but to see it in a game, you're like, whew. From a lefty? No offense to lefties out there.
From a lefty.
I don't know. It just looks
I'm a
so
lefty.
different.
That's crazy.
It's like, it looks so
No,
different.
it does.
It
It's-
looks different.
it's
and
weird.
I love it. I mean, I covered Tua in college, and that was like, it fascinated me then. It's now going to fascinate me with Michael. So
Something that I thought was really interesting to your point about the connection with Michael Penix and Casey Washington was I actually, watching it live of those first 5 series, on the moments where Michael Penix didn't hit Casey because he threw to him 7 times, but only 2 of those were completions.
Yeah.
On a few of them, I kind of, in my head, was like, he's overthrowing him. He's overthrowing him. He's overthrowing him. He's not worried. But what was really interesting is after the game, Casey was asked about his connection with Michael, and he was saying how he took a lot of the onus of those misses on himself
As he should.
Right, because he said that he threw me a good ball. I need to do a better job of being in position to make those grabs. And that was something that even going back and watching it, that just goes to show you that like you can't make these like snap
No.
it's easy to blame the quarterback.
And it's
Right.
why coaches at the podium say, they are better equipped and more intelligent than
Right.
anybody else to quickly like evaluate what has happened.
And they still won't.
Even they are like, let me go watch the tape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so important to like, okay, before ever making kind of this like snap judgment, like, like Michael Penix just like missed this guy 5 times. It really was. It was like there were some timing issues. There were some spacing issues. Like there's more that goes into it than just, the quarterback missed his guy. Sometimes that can be the case. But in this case scenario, having Casey say, they were good balls. I need to do it. I'm in learning. I need to be better. I need to know where I need to be. And that to me was evident of these guys one, where Michael Penix Jr. is, I think, in his abilities, but also a guy like Casey Washington, where it's like, these are things I know 110% I need to be better at. I'm going to go and be better at
Michael was doing the same things, though. Like, I think he could have probably gone through each ball and said whether or not it was in the right place. Like, both of them were very accountable in their post-game press conferences.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even Raheem said really there was just like one ball that Mike would probably want back, which is indicative of a good game. And what I saw kind of on film, to your point, Tori, about the ball specifically to Casey. So that first one on the right sideline where he puts the ball like right on the 50. And even in the moment, I think I tweeted this, it looks like Casey, if he had just kind of kept running under the ball, is there and catches it in stride. He's almost expecting a little bit of a back-shouldered ball, but what Michael Penix saw was, all right, he's on top of the corner. I'm going to throw it out in front of him and let him run under it on the sideline and keep going. And we saw the exact same play with Chris Blair. Same ball, same outcome. It's just that's a teaching moment for Casey. Now, there's another connection that they missed that I put a little bit more on Michael Penix, and it comes off of a play action outside stretch zone to the right. The defense thinks they're going to do it and boot back to the left because Michael Penix is a lefty. So he runs that play action. He starts to kind of boot, and then he stops. And Casey, as soon as the DB is turning to run back the other way, breaks it out to the right sideline. Michael Penix is just a tick slow. And that's the ball that ultimately is carried out of bounds, and it's ruled out of bounds. If he lets that ball maybe a half a second sooner go, that's a completion, and that's a beautiful completion because it's a 35-yard ball on a rope from Michael Penix. But by and large, I thought he was really quick coming off of reads that weren't there, knowing where his other routes in the progression were, and just snapping, seeing it, letting it go. And, I mean, everybody, I think, in the kind of NFL Twitter community after that first game has been like, all right, Michael Penix, this is what we expected to see. This looks good. So that should really, I think, encourage Falcons fans that a lot of people are seeing right now from Michael Penix what the Falcons saw back in April and even before that during the draft process.
Terry is probably like, told y'all.
Yeah, right? He's pretty happy right now. But I think that was Kevin King probably deserves a little bit of a mention here. Tori, you want to touch on him just quickly?
Yeah, he's someone who has not played in a pro game, in an NFL game for 2 seasons.
Couldn't tell. Could have fooled me.
I recommend people go back and listen to his post-game press conference. I actually felt like, just from a person-to-person standpoint,
amazing.
Let alone the fact that he had a good performance and he's someone who's fighting for a roster spot and everything that he's gone through, the fact that he stood up there and was talking about the things of the game that he missed and how important it was for him to go out there, and how even in a week 1 preseason game, and y'all know how I feel about the preseason, I hate it, he had this moment on the field where it was almost like an accumulation of the last couple of years of work and trying to get back into the league. And
he said, I felt home.
Yeah.
I finally felt home.
Wow.
Right.
That's awesome.
Chills.
God, he's my king.
Yeah. Oh, God. But
that's a joke I would make. Come on now.
I mean that sincerely. That was not a joke. That's the most sincere thing I have ever said.
On this podcast.
I thought it was a pun.
It was I was pleasantly pleased by what we've seen from him, especially in joint practices and especially in that preseason game. And yeah, I mean, just again, from a human moment, that was very nice.
I mean, for him, people always mention the injuries. He's coming back from an injury. That first season he took off was for mental health reasons. And so to think like you were in a place where mentally you could not compete. You were like, I don't want to be a part of this. Like your career, your dream, you don't want to be a part of it. To take a whole season off and to be like, okay, I'm back. I'm comfortable with myself. I'm ready to do this. I'm strong enough to do this again. Only to get injured, that is another pushback in like your progress mentally. Like, yes, physically too, but to think like everyone, I will say like, I think coming back from the mental break is bigger than maybe the injury. Because injuries happen to athletes. Right. But he took himself out of the game. And I recommend listening to his press conference. He also, after he got injured last year, put this long YouTube video out. I watched it when the Falcons signed him to like understand why he took off. And he's super candid. I'm pretty sure he's just in his car. But he's super candid about the entire experience and like what a place he was in the year before mentally as to why he took a step away. And it's just, I don't know. It's the stories like that you're like, you go, kid.
Yeah.
Well, and you hope that, because the Falcons have a lot of those types of guys on this team, right? Kyle Pitts.
It's actually wild.
Kevin King, Kirk Cousins, Grady Jarrett. A lot of guys kind of coming
Eddie
back
Goldman.
from Eddie Goldman is a perfect example of like these guys that have been through trials and tribulations. Michael Penix. Part of the reason they really like Michael Penix because he came back from 2 pretty tough injuries early in his career.
Yeah.
And then he leads Washington and does everything that he does there. So I wonder
call it a
if
comeback,
this
kid.
is going to be a mentally tough team. If that's, Raheem has said he wants the identity to be forged out on the field. Maybe a lot of these guys, maybe it's a mentally tough team. Who knows? Terrin, you're writing the camp report for today, Monday's practice. What did you see out there?
Well, we're leading with DeMarcco Hellams because I think that's the news of the day. And but other than that, there were like some really standout moments when it came to the secondary, I thought. I thought it was interesting. Drake London had a tougher day, which we haven't seen him necessarily struggle this camp. But the 3 balls he got were broken up, and I could tell he was getting frustrated because you could just hear him yelling. But
was that more
it wasn't
on
me
the-
looking him in the eyes being like, you're not well.
He came over, he was like,
he's just-
man, Terrin,
just
puts
he was
his
just
arm around
yelling,
you.
and I could hear him.
Yeah.
But what was interesting is like then toward the end of practice, you could see Kirk Cousins working directly with Drake, and Kirk would like jog a route and be like, this is how I want you, like stand like this, look at me like this, and then they would run it.
And we just talked about the importance of that with Casey Washington and Michael Penix, right?
Yeah.
Like bang, bang. That's why Matt and Julio, like for years,
Yeah.
they developed that type of chemistry. You could talk about Marvin Harrison and Peyton Manning. Like that is important, knowing,
Right.
hey, when you see this, we're seeing it the exact same way from different vantage points.
Yeah, and so that was just kind of seeing Kirk the teacher in action, and I really loved that moment between them. Other than that, I really thought
Copyright.
Anthony Johnson stood out a lot to
I
me.
also wrote down Anthony
he
Johnson's
was
name.
everywhere. Hand on ball.
I wrote down Anthony Johnson's name during joint practices. I wrote his name down during the preseason game, and I wrote it down again today.
It's like a girl in 3rd grade, just like Anthony Johnson, Anthony
Right, yeah.
Johnson,
I'm a number
Anthony
girl,
Johnson,
so I have all their
Anthony
numbers in my notebook. 43, you're great.
I love watching him play. The physicality of which he brings, because he's a bigger. We talked about this last week during joint practices. He's a bigger body DB, like a lot bigger of a body. He almost has like a linebacker type of build, and I just
205.
yeah.
Thank
I think
you.
we did this
Yeah.
exact same thing last week.
Or you're just having deja vu.
Maybe. But I thoroughly enjoy watching him play, and the physicality of which he brings, the body type of which he brings. I don't know. He's kind of a sleeper for me over the course of the last week that I think more people should be talking about. I know we've talked a lot about Kevin King, Antonio Hamilton,
Yep.
and those guys are getting a lot of reps. I think even Antonio Hamilton was getting some slot work today, which I found to be very interesting, as Clark Phillips was working more outside, and you know all that kind of stuff.
Clark had a good practice too.
Clark did
Have a good practice, and again, Clark Phillips these DBs. I think competition is really, really heating up with this group as we're getting, because the DBs, that's a group that you are okay to carry more of them. Usually, especially if you're considering like, okay, we want some of them to play more on special teams, like how kickoff body is changing and what they're needing to supplement the rules, all that kind of stuff. Like, I think that this group of DBs, there's a lot of fiery competition that's happening, and I've thoroughly enjoyed watching them play out there.
And there's opportunity. I
There
think
is.
that's the key thing. Like, it's not just fighting for depth. There are starting roles open.
Yeah.
Except for at cornerback, because I got it. But there
Yes,
are
that-
starting
wait, no,
That was
that's-
amazing.
oh,
You
wait.
just dropped the best part of the podcast
Wait,
like
this
23
is we
minutes in.
have to tell the people what happened today during Raheem's presser. At the very, very end, he was joking about how, y'all keep asking me who's going to start opposite AJ Terrell, and he just kind of laughed, and then Terrin pipes up. She goes, "So who is it?" And he goes, "You, Terrin, you've been looking real good out there."
That's all he's been waiting for is one person in the team
don't
meeting
know.
room to be like, Coach, I'll do it.
Yeah. Who knew? Mike
was
Hughes, Clark Phillips, you guys, like, just say
I
you want to do
volunteer
it.
as tribute.
I was a big inside linebacker during my powder puff days.
Nice.
I love that.
Terrin Waack with a sack.
Yeah, what were you, a Brian Urlacher type or a Deion Jones?
She goes,
This is my
just
favorite thing is throwing
ran at
Terrin
people.
just like as much as I can and just seeing how iron sharpens iron, Terrin. So I love that. I think that the secondary, and we kind of talked about this during the game, is like the amount of coaching knowledge and just intelligence in that room. Like, you should expect some of these guys to have maybe the best years of their career, right? Because of the wealth of knowledge just that they have at their disposal. So if we're talking about like a known household name, and a lot of people are looking at maybe like edge rusher or that second cornerback spot and saying, well, there's not somebody that I know. There's not a Patrick Peterson or somebody
There doesn't
coming
have
in.
to be.
There doesn't have to be because, and Raheem said it today, like they take a lot of pride in getting rookies and getting kind of lesser known players up to snuff, like getting them to get the best ball possible out of them. Like that is what a coach is here to do. And I think they love and relish that challenge. And you can't really quibble with the results so far. I think in Miami, they held up really well against the Dolphins receivers in one-on-ones. I mean, they gave up that one long touchdown to Tyreek Hill. 17 teams on their 17-game schedule are going to do that, I'll bet, this year because he's Tyreek Hill. But I've been really impressed with them. And I watched the offensive line today because I kept turning around and watching the video screen. It was the first time that I've really done that so far in camp.
Oh, I love doing that.
And I was just like, let me watch this offensive line because it's hard to see from the sideline, especially at ground level. And I thought that the interior, specifically Drew Dahlman and Matthew Bergeron, had awesome days. Yes. And I think that Matthew Bergeron has been somebody who kind of quietly is a lot of people are excited about in year two. But same with Drew Dahlman. And if they can, we know Chris Lindstrom, we know Jake Matthews, we know Caleb McGarry, but like if those two guys can take a big step forward, man, we're talking about the Falcons offensive line in the same way that we're talking about like Detroit, in the same way that we're talking about some of like the best units, I think, around the league, and that's huge.
Matthew Bergeron is really going to waylay someone on those screens.
He really is.
I love it. I love it when they run any type of screen to Matthew Bergeron's side because every time I'm like, there he goes.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
He's such a violent lineman. I love it.
He's like, the anti-Canadian. It's great. Just bucking stereotypes left and right.
That's great.
I don't have a follow-up to that.
So
Anti-Canadian.
We'll go camp champ then. Terrin, who you got? Is it
Number 43.
There you go.
Number 43.
I also had Anthony Johnson, but I will give a honorable mention, though my vote is going to go to Anthony Johnson because he was also my camp champ. I thought Lorenzo Carter had a good day.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I thought that he obviously we talk a lot about Bralen Trice and how you no longer have him at your disposal, but Lorenzo Carter has kind of been the leader of this outside
He's the guy
linebacker.
we just haven't talked about.
Right, yeah. We haven't talked a lot about Lorenzo Carter, and I felt like
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
no, I don't think it's a bad
He's doing
thing.
his job.
The expectation. I expect Lorenzo Carter to go out and perform well down in.
Yeah, we haven't
down
talked about Jake Matthews.
Right,
Just go out there and just do your stuff. We know what you're doing.
Sometimes-
I have Zoe
it's-
with a sack today.
Sometimes it's just if you're not like talking about somebody, like that's what I always say. Like whenever I see like anything, like a mean comment or someone tweeting something mean at me, I always try to like.
Sorry, that's all my burners.
Right, yeah. I'm always like, when you go to a restaurant and you have a really, really great experience, you don't go on Yelp and leave a good review for somebody.
You should, because I use Yelp on the daily.
But there are a lot of times where if you have a bad experience, that's when you're very loud about, I had a bad experience.
Right.
So for guys like Matthew Bergeron, Jake Matthews, Lorenzo Carter, that we're not talking a lot about in this podcast, I actually think it's just because like we expect them to go out and perform well. And that's what they're doing.
With a lineman, that's normal. I feel like all of them will say, if you talk about me, I did something wrong. If you realize me, I'm not doing my job correctly. But
a pass rusher, you would like to have them be talked about.
But I think it's because we've been talking so much about like rotation.
That's
battle.
the point that I mean. It's James Smith-Williams across from him is a surprise. It's Bralen Trice across from him is a little bit of a surprise. It's Arnold Ebike, but he's that mainstay on the other side.
So it's a different type of silence
for sure
about him.
Yeah. And I thought he's been doing well. I think he's been doing well.
But stop tweeting about Bradley Pinion every time he just has like one bad punt. The guy, 15 great punts, one bad punt. I see all of you. You're just like, Bradley Pinion, what's going on? So stop doing that. I think Anthony Johnson, he's going to be our camp champ. I did want to kind of just shout out again. I was going to name Drew Dahlman, even though it was really tight for me between Bergeron and Dahlman. He kind of finished practice off a little bit stronger. And then Darnell Mooney. He was my front runner for like half of the day, and then he dropped that ball kind of on the left side of the end zone where it would have been a touchdown. And then I was like, all right, time to watch the offensive lineman. Sorry, Darnell, but I thought he looked really sharp out there, and I'm pretty optimistic. I think Darnell is going to be, we keep talking about Kyle Pitts, we keep talking about Drake London, and Majan, and for good reason.
Right.
But I do wonder if we look back and Darnell has 900 yards and 7 touchdowns this year, and it's like, all right, look at him.
I feel like Darnell is going to kind of be like Jesse Bates last year, where like they're not new to the league, but they spent a few years with one team, and while they were good there, they came here and popped off. Kind of like Jesse had a huge year last year, his best year of his career so far. I'm expecting that out of Darnell.
I like that. Ooh, all right. We are getting ready to wrap things up. It was a little bit of a longer episode, but we just had a lot to cover. I'll open the floor one last time, though. Tori, anything else you want to get off your chest before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good. I'm ready to hit this week, and we'll be in Baltimore at the end of the week. So
heck yeah. Terrin?
You didn't want to talk to us after that game. I got home at like 4 a.m.
Yeah, I'm still kind of like trying to catch up on sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This is good.
I looked at my Whoop metrics today, and there's just like recovery is all in the red, and the strain was like way at the top.
Yeah, Garmin is very angry with me.
I'm crashing. But thank you guys so much for listening to all of today's episode, and congratulations to Anthony Johnson on being the camp champ for the first time. We still have Clark Phillips as the leader in the clubhouse. He's honestly been a really strong contender in training camp, so I kind of feel pretty good about that. But he only has 2, so it's an open race for anybody at this point. We still have a couple weeks left. But please spread the word on this podcast, Falcons Final Whistle. You can get it Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can also check us out on YouTube. But that will do it for us today. We will catch you guys again on Tuesday. For Tori McElhaney and Terrin Waack, I'm Will McFadden. We'll see you guys tomorrow.